Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for High Velocity Radio.
Lee Cantor here, another episode of High Velocity Radio, and this is going to be a good one. Today we have with us Dave Robinett with Pound 250. Welcome, Dave.
Thanks, Lee.
I'm excited to learn what you're up to. Tell us a little bit about Pound 250. How you serving folks?
Well, it's pretty simple. And we've all heard radio advertisements when we're cruising down the road that say, hey, we've got a great product or service. Just call us at 877-234-1792. Right, which makes it basically impossible because nobody can remember 10-digit phone numbers.
Right.
So what we do is replace those 10-digit phone numbers with a call to action, such as just dial pound 250 and say Pizza Hut, or the business name or business slogan. Our system recognizes that brand keyword, and then we connect the caller, however the advertiser wants to receive that call.
So now, is this mainly for national organizations, or does this work locally as well?
Local or national. We have a nationwide relationship with iHeartMedia, which is the largest radio station ownership group in the country. So through them, we offer local keywords, as we call them, for local radio advertisers. But many times they will have a regional or national advertiser who may do a campaign in, let's say, Atlanta, Houston, and Dallas only, or they've got advertisers on their national syndicated radio shows like Rush Limbaugh, John Hannity, others, and we set those keywords up to work nationwide. So the thing about Pound 250 is you don't, unlike the speed dials you may remember from your childhood that you had to program into your own landline phone, Pound 250 already works on everybody's mobile phone because it's programmed into the network of T-Mobile, Sprint, AT&T, Verizon, US Cellular, et cetera. And it also happens to work on all the Canadian mobile carriers as well.
So now, if I'm in a local market and I want pizza, and then I go Pound 250 pizza, is that something like I'll get, or is it like it could already be taken?
Well, it might already be taken, or it might not. That keyword might not be in use in your particular market. So unlike 411, where you could find every business listing, and pay a couple dollars for the privilege of doing that, before the internet came. We don't have every business in the world, so a business has to subscribe to our service to get a brand keyword that is functional in their markets. So you may or may not be in a market where we have a pizza client, for example.
Right. So then the way I reach out to somebody on your team, and then I can see what's what, because if I'm Joe Pizza guy in, Omaha, Nebraska, I don't care. Right about what's pizza in Vermont. I just want to make sure that when someone's in Omaha, Nebraska, they can reach me.
That's right. Yeah, and our system knows basically where you're calling from, so it knows to send those calls to the local advertiser and not an advertiser in a different state. So our new, so we've got there are several categories that you hear quite frequently on local radio. So it could be pain doctors, various home services companies like home security, lawn care, plumbing, electricity, LASIK, eye surgery. You see quite a bit. Men's health. We've even got a garage door company in Los Angeles. Various medical services.
What about like personal injury? You see a million of those.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a big law firm in the Southeast, Morgan & Morgan, that a long time ago, they were able to secure the dialing code Pound Law, which is actually Pound 529. But they are one of only a handful of companies that have a short dialing code like we do. And the thing about it is that you can't get them anymore. The carriers will not set up new ones. So that's okay, because you can come to pound 250 and take advantage of our speed dial, pound 250, which already, and the benefit compared to getting your own, which is impossible anyway. The benefit is that, we have advertisers on the radio across the country and on national radio. So radio listeners to some extent are already familiar with pound 250. They're used to hearing it in their local markets and on national radio. So it's already in their head a little bit. And it's also a fairly easy phrase. There's just something about 250 or 250 that is easy to remember. It sounds like how much money I usually have in my pocket, right? As opposed to, you might get some, odd dialing code, star 319 or something like that. But again, you can't get them anymore anyway, so that's moot.
So what am I putting into so on my phone, I'm hitting the pound and then the 2, the 5, the 0, and then what happens next?
And then you press talk. So it's just like you were dialing a regular phone number, except you only had to dial, punch in 4 digits rather than 10. And it's 4 that you could remember, pound 250, right? And then you press talk. So you're making a voice phone call.
Right.
You're making a voice call. And then that comes into our IVR system, and everybody, with a mobile phone in North America that dials pound 250, they all hear the same prompt: hello, please say the keyword. Now, of course, they would only do that after they heard an advertisement inviting them to do so. Hey, dial pound 250 and say Mesa Garage Door. Hey, dial pound 250 and say West Medical. Dial pound 250 and say LASIK. So then our IVR system, which is equipped with speech recognition, understands that brand keyword that the person says, and then we know what to do with it. And the basic actions are: one is we simply transfer the call to the advertiser's call center or front desk, right? We're just sending it on to the 10-digit phone number that nobody could have remembered, right, behind the scenes.
Right.
And then we also have the option, in addition to routing that live voice call, we have the option to ask the caller, hey, can we send you a one-time text message with more information? So even if your purpose as an advertiser is to get somebody to your website, we would say, hey, use pound 250 because we can put your link in their pocket, right? Even when they're driving. So imagine somebody's in their commute in the morning, they got 30 minutes to go. They can't go to your website when they hear a radio ad that says visit us online. They can't go to your website, but they can dial pound 250 at the stoplight or press Bluetooth button on their steering wheel and say dial pound 250, and it's all hands-free. They say the brand keyword, they get connected, they accept the text reply. Now that advertiser put that link in their prospect's pocket where they won't miss it after they get to work, right? Because it's going to be at the top of their messaging inbox. And so the upshot is, versus hearing a phone number you can't remember or hearing a website that you can't get to while you're out and about, pound 250, increases the level of response to your advertising. So it's really making your broadcast advertising, at least 50% more effective because we're removing those barriers to immediate response and immediate engagement with your prospects.
So now I understand that this is great for folks that are trying to get someone to take an action right away. Does it work also like for a nonprofit or a political candidate? Does it work for other kind of advertisers out there?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of our longest clients, we've had them probably 6 years at least. Food for the Poor is one nonprofit, and we've worked with Save the Children, still do, primarily doing radiothons. So when they get some airtime, like on the Salem Radio Network and others, and they're doing a radiothon, which means every other commercial break there's an in-studio representative saying, hey, today we're raising money for Food for the Poor. There's starving children in Haiti or Guatemala. On your mobile, just dial pound 50 and say the keyword food, or sometimes they say the keyword hope. And it's as easy as that. And the upshot is that they get, anywhere from 30 to 100% more calls than they would if they were saying, hey, call us at 844 blah, blah, blah.
So now, when you're working with clients, what does the typical process look like? Are they coming to you because they're already kind of radio advertisers and they just want to kind of squeeze out the most value because like it kind of defeats the purpose to run an ad that no one's going to remember the 10-digit phone number of or the website? And it sounds like your system is much more, you're more likely to kind of turn that lead into business.
Well, we're more likely to turn that prospect into a connected prospect, right? Because a lot of people will hear your ads, but they never get around to taking action, right? Because they get distracted.
Right.
So that's why it's critical that we call it the moment of conviction, right? I believe ads are compelling, and people are thinking to themselves, "Yeah, I need to check that out." But then if they don't do it immediately, they get distracted and they forget to do it. You've heard the old thing, they used to say in advertising class, oh, somebody needs to hear your message, 8 to 16 times before they take action. And I believe that's not because they weren't convinced the first time they heard the ad. I think it's because they didn't have a pencil in their hand to write down the stupid phone number.
So now, have you done research to show that, hey, with or without pound 250, these are kind of the improvement? This is what the improvement could look like?
Yeah, so we once had most of it's anecdotal that we get back from our clients, and the fact that they renew is proof in the pudding. But once we had a marketing company who actually set up a legitimate split test, or what they call A/B test, where you've got the exact same ad and the exact same media weight behind the ad. And for the first set, you use your regular 800 number, and then for the second set of ads, you use dial pound 250, say our brand name, right? And in that well-designed split test, and it was over 6 weeks on a variety of shows on the Premier Radio Network, the pound 250 spots got 150% more calls than the regular 800 number.
Wow. That's
so
impressive.
It's we can't promise that, and it's not always that high. It varies by category. It varies by the goodness of the creative behind the ad. It varies by the product category. A number of factors. But I can say that you'll never do worse with pound 250 than you do with your 800 number, and chances are you'll do better. Another example of research, so that was actual in the field research, right, with live advertising, live radio listeners. Our partner iHeartRadio just did a research study, though, where they had several, I think a couple thousand respondents, and they actually, played some real radio ads, some with 800 numbers, some with pound 250, and then they asked a bunch of follow-up questions. And they were comparing, regular 800 number, meaning one that does not have a bunch of repeater numbers like all threes. So they compared a regular 800 number to a vanity 800 number, which is one that spells a word, right? Like 1-800-Progressive. And then the third set of exposures was to ads with pound 250. And then they asked a bunch of questions like, hey, do you remember the brand that was advertised? Do you think this product is relevant to you? Hey, what was the phone number that was in that ad, right? And the upshot was that pound 250 it beat even vanity phone numbers for memorability, brand relevance, stated likelihood to call. All measures. It was close, but it edged out even vanity 800 numbers. And then compared to regular 800 numbers, it was like 50% higher on all of the measures: memorability, brand relevance, likelihood to call, et cetera.
Now, are there certain verticals that this works better with than others?
Well, yes, but in general, it's if you are an advertiser and your ads don't get any calls today, you may not get any calls with pound 250, right? So if you're selling 2-for-1 funeral plots, pound 250 is not going to cause you to get calls if you don't already get calls today. So we can't turn no calls into some calls, but we can turn 10 calls a week into 15 calls a week, right? By removing those barriers to response. So that's the first thing. It's got to be categories that get calls to begin with. So, I listed some of them. Pain relief, right? If even though maybe a small percentage of your listening audience may be suffering from back pain, knee pain, et cetera, they have a problem and they want to get rid of it, right? So that's a good direct response category. Injury attorneys is a curious one, right? Because how many of us were in a car accident last week and want to sue somebody? Not very many, right? So they're kind of looking for a needle in a haystack. So when they use pound 250, they're not going to suddenly get a flood of calls for dial pound 250, say car accident, right? Because the fact that they start using it doesn't mean more people were in car accidents last week. So they need to go into it with the mindset that I need to use pound 250 in my advertising every day or every month and begin to build some brand equity in that phrase, dial pound 250, say accident, so that when my listening audience does end up in a car wreck, it's at the top of their mind, right? They know, oh, I know who to call now, right? Because these guys advertise consistently on this station. But LASIK docs again. If you're a mortgage broker and you've got really low rates, that'd be a good category.
Now, are people? This is to enhance their advertising they're doing. This doesn't replace. Does this replace my Google ad budget or my Facebook ad budget?
No, it'd be complementary. So it's primarily for broadcast advertising, meaning radio or TV ads. And the reason is, historically, broadcast advertisers didn't really have a good way of tracking the effectiveness of their ads, because you cannot click on a radio ad, right?
Right.
And you can't click really on a TV ad. Now, there's beginning to be ways you can, but for the most part, those are true statements. And so therefore they didn't have proper attribution. Right. The best they could do was correlate. Okay, we ran an ad at 5:10 p.m. and we got a few phone calls, and presumably those phone calls were driven by the ad that we played. That's the best they could get, which is
right.
Correlation, right? But it wasn't like a direct click through. Well, pound 250 suddenly gives attribution back to radio and broadcast TV, because when an ad plays on some of these national syndicated talk shows, we see 30 calls come in the moment after the ad plays, or even as the ad is playing, and 95% of those calls are received on our platform within 3 minutes of when the ad plays. So it's obvious that it was driven by that one ad, but B, if pound 250 is only being used in their radio ads, then there's no other place it could have come from but the stimulus of the radio ad.
Now, that's what
made iHeart so excited to partner with us, because they never had attribution for radio, and they were starting to lose those media dollars to digital, because digital was trackable,
right?
Radio was not. But pound 250 created a way where radio is now trackable once again.
Now, what have you seen as a personal best in terms of in a national ad versus a local market ad? What's the most kind of activity you've gotten from running a national ad, or seeing, within a 15-minute window of running the ad? Is that something that can be thousands, or is it hundreds? What's a typical response?
Well, it could be thousands, and we get advertisers occasionally calling us up saying, "Oh, we get 20,000 calls a week," and I just don't believe it, because we are on the highest rated national syndicated shows, with 6 million listeners, right?
Right.
And when they play an ad, they get 50 to 100 calls.
Right.
If it's a good category. They don't get thousands of calls. They get like 100 calls.
Right.
Now we have run, through our partnership with iHeart, we'll give them free keywords for use, for their local, radio personalities, and they run promotions sometimes. And so we had this one in Baltimore one time where the local personality say, hey, dial pound to 50 and say Kane picks. If you want to see, all of our party picks that when I took the team out on the town last night. And that morning we got like 10,000 calls, like in a 15-minute period in Baltimore.
Wow, that's
so, our system can support a lot of inbound.
But
calls.
that's an outlier, right? That's unusual to get that many off of
That's an outlier. So, a good local advertiser in New York City, for example, even in New York City, right, on one of the top iHeart stations, they'll get 20 calls, for their home security company who's offering a free Ring video doorbell with your paid monitoring service. They'll get 20 or 30 calls, when they run an ad.
Right. And that's not you. That's the effectiveness of ads in general. Your thing, if anything, allows you to accurately kind of match that kind of response with it being a real lead, not just hoping that it came in from wherever and doing that correlation and kind of connecting dots. This is a direct, hey, they had to have heard it there, because where else could they have picked that?
Well, yeah, that's the only place, this advertiser I'm
right.
thinking of, Sloman's Home Security, who's in New York. So, well, here's the story with iHeart. Sloman's Home Security in New York City was a big spender with iHeart Radio, like a big spender, like a six-figure spender. Seven-figure spender. And they told iHeart, radio may be working for us, but we can't tell whether it's working for us, right? Because it's not trackable.
Right.
So we decided we're going to take all that media budget and devote it to digital. And the SVP of sales of iHeart New York said, no, hang on, we have this.
We'll figure this out.
let's give it a try. So they did it. And iHeart paid for the trial. Our fee, which is modest anyway. And lo and behold, they started getting, 30, 50, calls a day. And they said, oh, wow, that really works. And we know that it came from radio. So, Pound 250 rescued that entire, media spend with iHeart, because it was going to go to Google or some other digital platform after that. And once they saw it performing in New York City, they added radio in Philadelphia, and they added radio in Miami and Los Angeles. And now they spend, seven figures with iHeart.
Right, because once you can track it and attribute the lead to the result, then now it's just the math problem. Does that make financial sense or not?
Yeah, and they've told us, they need to get a lot of inbound leads because, they don't convert them all, right? So it's a function of, well, how many leads or calls do you get, and then what's your conversion rate? And if you have a low conversion rate, you got to get more calls or leads at the top of the funnel, as they say.
Right.
But here's the other thing, right? So a lot of ad agencies have this idea, drive to web. And I'm not saying you should not mention your website. You should. You always should. But if your whole idea is that, we need to drive to web because in theory it's trackable, and in theory it's low cost, right? Because it doesn't require any, paid humans to speak to the prospects. Well, there's a couple of fallacies in there. One is everybody knows, it's sort of common knowledge that if a prospect speaks to a human, the close rate is higher, right? Because the human representative can answer questions and build rapport, and close the person. Whereas if somebody goes to a website, they might click around and they're either going to be convinced or they're not. But it's just a much lower conversion rate when you send somebody to your website versus connecting them with a company representative. So that's number one, is connect them to humans. You're going to have a higher close rate. Now, if it's a low cost item like a pizza or something, yeah, fine, send them to your website. If it's a high dollar sale like a new roof, or LASIK eye surgery, you definitely want to connect them to a human because you want a higher conversion rate on your high ticket item, right?
Right.
And then the other fallacy about drive to web is, well, yeah, that'll be trackable if they ever make it to your website.
Right.
You can't track anybody that doesn't make it to your website, or those who intended to go to your website, but 30 minutes later when they finished their commute, they forgot all about you because they heard 20 more ads and their spouse called them, right? And they got to, get to work, et cetera, et cetera. That's why I forgot the second half of my story. So when somebody hears an ad, we call that, they might have a moment of conviction. Yes, I need to check out that brand. But they oftentimes never get to the act of connecting, the act of dialing the phone number, or the act of, visiting the website. So that's a breakage point between the moment of conviction and the act of connecting with that brand. And that's what we're here to solve, because we've removed all of the barriers, like, oh, I got to get to my PC, or I can't remember that phone number.
Now, if somebody wants to learn more and get on, see if there are keywords available in their local market, or just wants to have a conversation to learn more about how it could help them improve the effectiveness and efficiency of their ad spend, what's the website?
The website is pound250.com, and you have to spell out pound, so it's POUND 250.com. Or if you just want to call us up, hey, on your mobile, any mobile, dial pound 250 and say, get more calls.
Good stuff. Well, Dave, congratulations on all the success, man. That's a great story.
Well, thanks for the interview, Lee.
All right.
Appreciate it.
This is Lee Cantor. We'll see you next time on High Velocity Radio.